All right, so we're back with another exciting episode of the One Poor Problems podcast. And today I have an exciting guest. And if you don't know him, I don't know where you have been. Today we are joined by Paul Lavoie, Connecticut's Chief Manufacturing Officer. Super excited to have you on the show today, Paul.
Thanks, Sal. I'm really excited to be here. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we get into learning a little bit about Paul, if you don't happen to know who he is, again, you must be under a rock if you don't. But today, Paul, you asked us to bring in these specific vitamin waters. Tell us why this was significant for you.
So this is a vitamin water rise, and I drink a vitamin water rise every single morning. This gives me 250% of my vitamin C requirements. So if you wonder why I never get sick, I like to think it's because of my vitamin water.
Yep.
The other thing it gives me is 100% of essential B vitamins. Mm-hmm. So if you're asking where I get my energy from, I like to think I get it from my vitamin water.
Okay.
I don't drink caffeinated coffee or caffeinated drinks. So people say to me all the time, "Gee, you're hyped up on caffeine." I'm like, no, this is me. This is natural, but I start every day with a vitamin water rise, zero sugar, and it gives me my requirements. But it also just is a ritual. You know, we all have morning rituals.
Yeah.
And this is one of my morning rituals, and we always have a nice stock of vitamin water in our house. So
I love it.
This cheers. Yeah.
Very cool.
Oh,
so no caffeine.
it's good.
That is crazy to me.
Yeah.
Because of the fact that you seem to always be on the go.
Yeah.
But no caffeine, just the vitamin water.
No caffeine. No caffeine in coffee. Up to about a couple of weeks ago was big Coke Zero drinker during the day, but now I'm on Sprite Zero and root beers and caffeine-free things. Just trying to cut out what I would consider to be some artificial stimulants and things like that to just keep me more focused. So,
got it.
Yeah.
Love it. Cool.
Yeah.
So, again, super excited to just learn a little bit more about your background, and for those that are tuning in, just to understand, who you are and where you came from, because if you're not close to the manufacturing space, you may not have known your background. However, you've been now in this role for the past 3 years, today specifically. But, you've kind of burst onto the scene, and now people are really talking about manufacturing in Connecticut and, really making a name for it. And I think you obviously have a huge part in that. So tell us a little bit about you and your background.
Sure. So I'm Connecticut's Chief Manufacturing Officer. Connecticut's the only state that has this role. The position was created by the legislature, and I'm appointed by the governor to serve in this role. I'm the second Chief Manufacturing Officer. I can say now the longest serving, 3-year anniversary. But the second Chief Manufacturing Officer, Colin Cooper, was the first. So we've had the position since 2019. And my job simply is to support and grow the manufacturing sector. The requirements to have this job is you had to run a manufacturing business in the state of Connecticut, and you needed to be well known within the manufacturing community as well. And I was the general manager at Carey Manufacturing in Cromwell, Connecticut. My job at Carey was twofold. I was brought in by the owner of the company to help him reshore a product line from China, so bring an entire catalog from China to the U.S. This was in 2017, before all that stuff became vogue, and then to execute a succession plan, because he had brought in his daughter and his son-in-law. So he has 2 daughters, so one daughter and then the other daughter's husband, so brother-in-law, sister-in-law, to run the business. And they were in their 30s, and they were the chief financial officer, the chief human resource officer, the chief engineer, the lead CNC programmer, were all of retirement age. And so my job was to develop and execute a succession plan that would allow the next generation of leadership to take over and have a next generation of leadership that would take the company for the next 30 years.
Very cool.
And so as timing would happen, near the end of my tenure there, Mike Fitzpatrick, who's the general manager, was growing into his role as being the general manager, and I had less and less to do, so I started to do things externally. I started to get more involved with workforce issues, supply chain issues, innovation issues, and became kind of a anytime there was a committee, they'd say you have to have Carrier Manufacturing on the committee, you have to have Paul Lavoie. So I became well known in the industry. And prior to that, I worked in a manufacturing business. I owned a couple businesses, and then prior to owning a couple of businesses, I had a big corporate career where I worked for some really big companies in some senior VP roles. In different spaces, in technology and advertising and marketing, really all really retail based, calling on retailers. So interesting career. You couldn't have mapped this out if you wanted to, but I've ended up in probably the best place I could ever end up because I truly love what I do every single day, and this is a perfect job for me. So.
Yeah, and it absolutely shows. I mean, again, if anyone is on LinkedIn, and it'd be hard pressed if you're in Connecticut and on LinkedIn to not see anything that you're doing, because one, you're on like a road show. I feel like you're literally somewhere every day, and you're always posting and giving the updates of kind of the things that are happening in the space. And I think it's been really cool to educate people and have them just understand a little bit more about like the common challenges and the things that they can overcome, and then solutions and potential services and things that are going to allow them to enable growth and sustainability.
Sal, my wife says that she thinks my job is going on field trips every day, and to some degree she's right. But when I go out and meet with manufacturers, it's I have a marketing background, so I branded it. I call it the L4 tour. It's lean in, listen, learn, and link. Right. So I lean into the manufacturing community, listen to what their issues are, learn how we I can help solve them, and link them to the resources that we need. And in order to do that, I had to build capacity and capability within the manufacturing ecosystem. So I look at it as it's the 3rd year anniversary. I was thinking about this today. Year 1 was find out what the problems are. Year 2 was build the capabilities and capacity to solve them. Year 3 was start solving them. And year 4 is going to be accelerate that, right? We need to accelerate the adoption of the solutions that we've developed to really help the manufacturing sector. So yeah, it's the only way that, when I took this job, there's no job description. The governor certainly doesn't tell me what to do. And my first thought was, well, what do I do? And well, Paul, you've had a pretty big career. What do you do? Well, go talk to your customers. And so that's what I set out to do. Is I set out to meet as many manufacturers as possible, and the number's over 325 in 3 years, and it's not stopping at all. I get calls all the time to people saying, "Hey, can you come out and visit with us and talk with us?" I had 3 calls this morning with connecting people to resources. So it's an important part. I think it's important for people to know that there's somebody at the highest levels of government in the manufacturing sector should know there's someone at the highest level of government that's there to support them, and that's why we exist.
Yeah, I love it. And I think your role is really unique in the aspect of leadership, because you have a team as part of the state of Connecticut that you're leading. But I think outside of that, I would say that's like the traditional side of leadership. But you're trying to also lead a culture and change in manufacturing outside of the walls that your office is. So tell me about some of the things that you've been promoting and things that you've been encouraging manufacturers to get involved with as building this culture as a leader outside of their organizations.
Yeah, we have this amazing manufacturing industry in the state of Connecticut, and what we found is that nobody was talking about it positively. And what happens is when nobody talks about it positively, that void gets filled with negative things. Right? Somebody will find something and that'll become a new narrative. And what I found out was that all of those narratives that people were talking about manufacturing were false. Oh, manufacturing is leaving the state of Connecticut. That's false. Aerospace doesn't have it doesn't have a future in Connecticut. That's false. And just manufacturing jobs are dirty and dark and dangerous. That's false. We did a study. We found out young people have no perception of manufacturing at all because we've taken out all of that from teaching. And so when I started, I decided big part of my job was to change the narrative. Right, to change the narrative about manufacturing, and that meant just to push as much positive stuff that I can out there. Now, I'm not a Pollyanna. I don't believe, there are significant problems. I know what they are, and we have a manufacturing strategic plan that addresses those issues. I mean, it's all about workforce, supply chain, and driving innovation, and we have a plan. We run 45 different programs that are working on solving those problems, but, I use the example of, in one of my talks, I use this example of, I've been married for 38 years, right? So there are things that my wife does that drive me crazy, absolutely crazy. And I'm sure anybody that's in a relationship can say that. And there are things that my wife does that I look at her and I still can't figure out why she said yes. Like, why did you even marry me? You're the most amazing person in the world. Now, you can look for both because they're both there. Right. And the reason why I think a lot of people get divorced is they start looking at all the negative stuff and they forget about all the positive stuff. And I don't live my life that way. I say, you know what? I'm going to take the bad with the good because the good overrides the bad. Doesn't mean I don't recognize the bad or don't see that. And I think a lot of people in the state of Connecticut, same thing. There's so much good in the state of Connecticut. And sure, there's things we need to be better at, but people are just focusing on the bad. And I want to focus on the good. And I'm not discounting the bad, and I'm making the bad better, right? I'm making the bad better. But focusing on the good, because what happens is you have to have this, pessimism is a toxin. And you have to have this culture of optimism to grow an industry. You need that in a company. You need that in a family. You need all of that to be able to grow that. And so I'm on this crusade to promote manufacturing in the state of Connecticut, to highlight all the good things that we're doing. And that's providing a culture for an entire state around an entire industry. And we get feedback like people having lunch in New York saying, well, manufacturing in New York. I mean, listen, if you want to get in manufacturing, there's two places you should go, China or Connecticut. Like, what? People are saying this. On the federal level, people are talking about what's happening in Connecticut, and they're like, "Oh, well, you're Connecticut. You're the leader in a lot of stuff, and we're the 48th biggest state, right? Who are we to be leaders? But we are." And then when you talk to manufacturers, and they come up to me and they say, "Paul, you know what? It feels different. Like the environment feels different." And the best way you can measure a culture and change is by how people feel. How do you feel about the state of Connecticut? Do you feel better about it than you did a year ago? Do you feel better than you did 2 years ago? And that's the feedback that we're getting. People are starting to feel better about it. And when they feel better about it, that's how we're going to continue to grow.
Yeah, I love it. And I think that sentiment of building the culture, I think, is one of the biggest pieces, because you need to focus on your culture. If you have a solid culture, that culture will bring the people, right? So I know you mentioned some of the biggest problems we have right now are workforce and innovation. And I look at both of those things and I tie them so closely together, because in my perspective, everyone coming out of school now and in the trades and everything that are stepping into the manufacturing space, they are thinking about the manufacturing technology differently than we would have, 30, 40, 50 years ago. The conversation now is like, where's the technology involved in the day-to-day? And those jobs are becoming less of the, quote-unquote blue-collar jobs. And instead, you are getting these people that are understanding these advanced technologies and trying to attract them. But I think we're at this interesting crossroads, and I'm curious to see your thought process on it, because we want those people to get more involved.
Yep.
But the technology that is in our manufacturers right now may not be there to be able to bridge the gap. So how is that something that's come up in your world?
Yeah, so you're spot on, right? The only time automation comes before education is in the dictionary, right? The only time innovation comes before learning is in the dictionary, right? All of this stuff has to be based in training people first and then adopting technology second. But what you really have to do, Sal, is you have to really take a look at who are the people that are going to be the future of manufacturing. And every single kid, right, and you can call a kid from K to 12, is connected with a device, uses technology. Technology is a regular part of their life. So if we expect them to come into the workforce and to do manual labor jobs, it is a false expectation to do that. Now, we're never going to eliminate manual work. We're never going to, there's some things that you still have to do by hand, and there's a great percentage of the population that still wants to work with their hands. But when you look at the future, you have to think about how do we match what's happening in the work environment to the skill set of the people that are coming in, so that we can get maximum job satisfaction. The second thing is we're never hiring our way out of the problem. There's never going to be enough people. Workforce shortages have been projected for an entire generation. We're talking to the 2040s and 2050s that we're still never going to have enough people. So this is not a job replacement strategy. It's not a job elimination strategy in any way, shape, or form. It's an upskilling and reskilling strategy to have machines to do the work for people we're never going to have. And we talk about AI. AI is never going to replace the worker on the shop floor, but a worker on the shop floor who is AI enabled will replace one that isn't. And so that's where we have to continually look at how we upskill and reskill the manufacturing ecosystem. And we got to go all the way back K through 12 to make sure that we're inspiring that next generation of creators and makers and leaders and innovators and designers and people that can disrupt current environments. And you're right, there's a big mix across the entire manufacturing ecosystem. There are highly automated facilities, and there are facilities that are still industry 2.0, right? Part of my job is to understand that ecosystem, but it's also to accelerate the adoption of those technologies, to understand what are the barriers, like what are some of the things that people are struggling with this technology or with innovation or with moving their business forward, and how do I help them? And so that's a focus area for 2025 is accelerating adoption. It really is, we know what the problems are, we know what the solutions are. Now I need to accelerate the adoption of those solutions.
Yeah, absolutely. And so if you talk about those solutions, right, the workforce thing, I think there's a ton of programs out there and a lot of resources for people to be able to bring in apprenticeships and offset like internship costs and even like certification and training. But you've seen the ebbs and flows of the actual funds for increase in technology and innovation and the use of these newer technologies that are out there. And I'm not talking about like the technology from the things that we do, but I have I've talked to other manufacturers on the show, and they've talked about different unique ways that they're using, whether it's augmented reality or VR or AI. Like there's a bunch of different cool things that they're doing, but at the end of the day, what you and your team are focused on is figuring out how do we continue to receive the funding to be able to continue to push that out. Yeah. How are those things, how are those conversations going as far as like you being able to promote those and try to secure those dollars?
Yeah, and understand that your organization plays a critical role in all that because, again, when you get a more connected manufacturing sector, now you need to make sure that you have protections within your IT systems, right? And we got to talk about cybersecurity, and we got to talk about compliance with all of that, and making sure that your IT systems are locked down because now you're dealing with serious intellectual property. So that's another thing that's expensive too. So, the job of the Office of the Manufacturing is really to do two things, right? Number one is how do I put catalyst capital in the marketplace? How do I put matching grant funds in the marketplace to accelerate the adoption of these technologies? There's two barriers. The two barriers are I don't understand it and I don't have enough money. So from the I don't understand it standpoint, we have already built infrastructure around educating manufacturers who want to adopt this technology through the Connecticut Center for Advanced Technology, through ConStep, through my other partners that we fund, where they can go and get educated on the digital transformation, additive manufacturing, robotics and automation, and AI. And then we have programs that put catalyst capital in the marketplace that allow them to get non-dilutive grant fundings. This is grants you don't have to pay back to be able to adopt the technology. So that's the role that a government should play in this, is to basically say, listen, we're going to do two things. We're going to build capacity, capabilities and capacities within the system. We're going to provide funding for education and training opportunities. And then we're going to put catalyst capital in the marketplace to accelerate the adoption. And it's paying off. I mean, we're getting great leverage of dollars. Every dollar that we put out in the marketplace, we're seeing $3, $4, $5 from private investment going into the market, into advancing the manufacturing sector. And that's a great use of your taxpayer money, is to be able to put that money back to work in creating jobs and creating opportunities and creating career opportunities for people to continue to better themselves and make more money. And so, again, putting your money to work to make you make more money.
Yeah. Yeah,
I guess that's
that makes sense.
Wow, yeah.
So if you were gonna say, hey, in 2025, this is what I think digital transformation looks like, right? Because we talked about the programs and the different types of technology and that kind of stuff. But if I'm a manufacturing leader, what are some of the major things that I should be considering, as I work through like my strategic plan to make sure that I'm staying at least with the curve, I don't need to be ahead of the curve, but I definitely don't want to be behind. So how do I, like, what should I be thinking about as a manufacturer? What are some of those things?
So I tell our manufacturers you need 2 plans on your desktop, right? You need a recruitment and retention plan because you're still going to need a workforce. So focus on retention, though. How are you going to keep people here? The second thing you need is you need an industrial automation plan. And what does that mean? It can mean a lot of different things, but specific to the digital transformation, you need to become educated, but you need to educate your entire organization. This isn't just send your engineers, because you need to send your HR people, because there's new job classifications and there's new ways to recruit and define these jobs. You need to send your leadership team so they can embrace and support the digital transformation. And again, for folks listening, this is really taking all the paper out of the processes in the manufacturing sector, digitizing it. And we're seeing things that used to take months to get on a machine, getting on machines in hours. I mean, this is, lead time is the new king, right? I mean, this is the thing. You have either price, quality, or delivery are your 3 factors, right? You can have 2 or 3. We used to say, right? You can have great quality, great delivery, but you're not going to pay the lowest price. You want a cheap price? Something's got to give. It's going to be delivery or quality,
Yep.
And you want poor quality. Nobody wants poor quality. So what gives is delivery time. What we found during the pandemic is that delivery time became much more important. And so the digital transformation allows you to do significant delivery times with great quality, which reduces the cost of doing business, which allows you to have a competitive price, which gets us to that trifecta that most of us can't get to unless we can use digital tools and things like that. So you should be starting to think about, how do I educate my team first? Central Connecticut State University is our partner with that. They have a set of curriculum of executive development programs. So these are not credit programs or anything like that. It's their adult learning piece of what they do, and industry education. But they have a whole set of programs that are all designed around educating your entire team. We have companies sending their entire team to Central to be trained on the digital transformation and how they can adopt this. And then once you're trained, you can then start to understand where your lane is going to be and how you can best adopt some of these technologies. And there are progressive companies out there right now that, like I said, they're sending their whole teams for training. They're already going on the journey. And those are the companies that are going to grow significantly, because as soon as the large primes, the Pratt & Whitneys, the electric boats, the electric boat, the Columbia class is all done digitally. The geared turbofan engine at Pratt & Whitney is all done digitally. So this is a market waiting for people, waiting for suppliers, and the suppliers that are investing in the digital transformation early are the ones that are going to win. They're going to have more business than they know what to do with, and the ones that don't buy into this transformation are the ones that they're going to suffer in the long term. But at State of Connecticut, we serve 100% of the manufacturers. So anybody who wants to go on this journey, we've got what you need. We have the right training resources, we have the right consulting resources, we have funding to be able to accelerate the adoption of these technologies. All you need to do is step into all of the programs that we have, and you can write a business plan for the next 20 years that'll have a great sustainable business.
Got it. I think that's really cool, because the first thing that came to mind when we start talking about digital transformation and we're like workforce development and like being able to hire enough people to do the work that is needed to be done, you often forget about the people that are already there, right? And I think for me on the technology side, I see this all the time. When I go into an organization, right, and definitely in a manufacturing organization where a lot of these processes that they do to create the product and things that they make are all run off of these like ancient technologies, right? Like they might be the people who have a Windows XP machine still like out there. And XP is crazy, where the people that are, I'm hiring into the organization right now weren't even born, when that was prominent as an operating system. And so you mentioned something about the training programs for like your entire organization, but I think that's a critical piece too, because these employees that are currently in the manufacturing space that may not be on the technical curve as the millennials and the Gen Zs and so forth, so on, they need to understand and adapt for those things too, because they're still, all of their experience is super important, but they have to be able to adapt to the technologies, or else they become at risk, right, in their space.
Yeah, and these are job enriching technologies. These aren't making things harder. These are making things easier. I'll give you a great story. I went to visit a printing company. They print boxes for companies and things like that. So if you can imagine, it's a big piece of cardboard, and they laser cut all of the shapes and whatever. Somebody has to punch those things out. So they had a guy that was sitting there, and his job was with a stick punching this stuff out and stacking it up. The owner found a machine that could automate that process, and he found a machine for $300,000. So he bought an automated machine to do that. Does it 1,000 times faster than this guy punching the sticks out can do it, right?
Yeah.
And it's a horrible job. Who would like that job? So he's telling me about it, and he goes, the ROI is incredible. I paid for this machine in like 3 months. I go, okay, where's the guy that was doing that job? Oh, yeah, that guy doing that job. I was paying him $18 an hour to do that job. He's over there. And he's running that machine over there. And now he makes $24 an hour running that machine. And I go, how is he? He goes, oh, he's happy as can be. He goes, that's a crappy job. Nobody wanted to do that. Now he's over there doing that job. He's running that machine. And he's really happy that he learned something new and he was upskilled. And now his income is increasing as well. And so that's a great example of, we're not replacing anybody's job. What we're doing is we're taking really, really bad jobs, replacing them with automation, but we're upskilling people and giving them opportunities to earn more money and to have better jobs. And so that's to me, that was a 20-person company where they're doing it. They're on the journey of trying to figure out how to increase their productivity, but more importantly, how to do more with the same people that they have. It's not nobody's laying anybody off because of automation at all. That's not happening. What's happening is in fact they're hiring more people. They're just hiring different people, and they need to reskill and upskill those people. And we have all kinds of programs to help people do that. So
yeah, I love that story, because I think that is like the most common misconception of advanced technology in the workplace, right? Everyone thinks that if we adopt AI, great, all these jobs are going to get cut, right? And the answer to that is that's not exactly true, right? And there's a lot of places where those roles can transition into, and I love that story because you had a guy doing a job that does not sound super enjoyable every day. Like, I can't even imagine, right? And instead of that guy thinking, I'm now obsolete, right? I don't have to do that anymore, and I have the ability to now learn something else and be more valuable. And kudos to that manufacturer for even having the foresight to make that decision, and then also give them that opportunity. I think that's really cool, and we need to hear more of those stories.
And there's hundreds of those stories across the manufacturing ecosystem. Of I went to another printing place, and they had 5 different generations of printers, and the guy that was running it was in his 60s. And I'm like, what? How did this guy have to change? He probably had 5 different careers at the same company, right? Because every time he got a new machine, he had to learn something new. And trust me, the job he has today is much better than the job he had 5 generations ago, right? Because I'm pretty sure he went home with ink all over him and he stunk and all this other stuff, and now he's running highly automated presses, and he can do this job later in his life. If he likes to work, he can do this job later in his life. He doesn't have, he's not in the hospital getting surgery for all these repetitive work injuries or things like that. I mean, quality of life is improved through technology as well. So it's an exciting time. It really is an exciting time, because we're right on the cusp of this, of really starting to understand what the technologies are. And manufacturers in the state of Connecticut, have an advantage over everybody else, because we have an Office of Manufacturing that has a strategic plan, that actually has money that we're putting back into the industry to help the industry grow. So
yeah, for sure. So talk to me about your involvement right now I see you all the time looking at you're connecting with aerospace organizations and DoD contractors, and I know that's a hot button topic right now, where with CMMC rolling out and that all happening, where do you see yourself being able to advocate for manufacturers, that are thinking about going down the CMMC journey? It's a scary place for manufacturers who don't, have a substantial technology budget.
Yep.
How are you in your office working with manufacturers to be able to help them, on that path?
So some of the grant programs that we have are loosely defined, meaning that you can use that money for whatever you'd like. And so we have a fund that they can use for their CMMC implementation. I think a better play for this is that a lot of this is coming from the federal government. And if the federal government, so these are unfunded mandates that are being put down onto the manufacturing base across the country. Mm-hmm. And what part of my job is to navigate the federal landscape to be able to say, hey, listen, we want to help you get up to speed on this, but can you give us some grant money or some things like that we can use to speed the adoption of these technologies? The digital transformation, we have a grant from the Department of Defense, and we have a grant from the Department of Commerce, both to drive the digital transformation in Connecticut's manufacturing sector. And these have been, we've had about $7-8 million of federal money come in to drive the digital transformation. Well, if you're going to start doing things with certification and other programs like that, I'd love to see federal money with state match money and private industry money all coming together to help drive this as well. Again, you can't, having these unfunded mandates, putting them on the backs of manufacturers and saying you need to be compliant or you're not going to do business is counterproductive to growing a robust manufacturing economy in the U.S. And so I spend a lot of time in Washington trying to navigate that federal landscape to say, hey guys, you want to do this, we're going to need money to be able to stimulate, to build capacity and capability to do this. What do you got? We have a federal funds team that's looking for grants all the time, and Washington, as we sit right now, they're freezing money, they're doing all this kind of crazy stuff. So we're in a different pattern, but that doesn't mean the work stops, right? I still need to convince folks in Washington that Department of Defense, Department of Commerce, if you're going to do this stuff, you need to be providing catalyst capital in the marketplace to allow people to do this, and you need to be giving states the opportunity to increase capacity and capability to guide manufacturers in doing this. So I spend a fair amount of time doing that as well. But that's advocating for Connecticut. Right? Yeah. That's out there saying, hey, listen, Connecticut is critically important to the defense of our nation. We're number one in aircraft engine and airplane parts manufacturing in the country. We're number two in shipbuilding in the country. I mean, we're tiny little Connecticut, right? We're 48th by size, 29th by population. We have the 22nd largest economy in the U.S. We punch well above our weight class here in the state, and it's significant from a defense perspective. We're number 6 in just program investment from the Department of Defense. Texas, Florida, California, New York, Virginia. Do you know how many Connecticut's can fit inside of Texas, Sal?
I don't.
49. And there's still room for Rhode Island. So, we compete with Texas, and you could put a whole country of Connecticut's inside of Texas. We're pretty proud. We're pretty proud of our chops in manufacturing and the influence that we have. But more importantly, we make sure that people come home safe from missions, whether it's in a submarine, whether it's in a F-35 jet fighter, or whether it's in a helicopter. That's Connecticut manufacturing. And so we get a lot of attention at the federal level. And so I spend a fair amount of time making sure that people know that Connecticut's ready here to support our certainly our defense sector, but all other sectors, and we have a growing consumer packaged goods sector here in the state. It's kind of crazy. We talk about manufacturing growing by $2 billion. 15 to 20% of that growth come from 3 areas: popcorn, non-alcoholic beer, and tea bags.
Yep.
We would have thought that, right? So from the federal side, spend a lot of time advocating for Connecticut and making sure that we're getting our fair share of investments here in the state.
So us at Charles IT, we find ourselves spending a lot of time dealing with manufacturers, and specifically ones that need to comply with CMMC regulations now. And I find myself in a lot of these conversations of, tell me candidly what revenue you're expecting to bring in from a CMMC contract. And then I have to say to them, this may not make sense, right? And that's a crazy thing to say, because one, nobody wants to turn away the opportunity at growing their business and bringing in more revenue or anything like that. And I'm saying that from the manufacturer standpoint, not Charles IT, right? And I look at it and I'm like, this doesn't make sense from a cost to expense justification for them. They just won't make money doing this, because the ability and the expense to maintain CMMC compliance is one of like the biggest, I think, pain points that we're going to see over the next, year of time as these are starting to roll out into contracts. I don't know how we're going to be able to maintain and keep these manufacturers open that are on the smaller side who may have a couple DoD contracts. Like, that's going to be the thing. Is the catalyst I love, because I think catalyst is what's going to allow everybody to step into the space and produce the things that the supply chain needs. But my concern is the maintaining of that and ability to keep those manufacturers creating the things that the supply chain needs. That's where I'm starting to get worried.
Yeah, and I think that the challenge is that's where we talk to the federal government about this all the time, and that is creating a reliability of supply. And what I mean by that is if I'm going to make the investment into becoming compliant, then I need to know I'm going to have future contracts that are going to pay for that.
Yeah.
And so you need in some cases you need a business development plan alongside your investment plan to make sure that you're getting the ROI. And manufacturers are gamblers. I mean, they gamble all the time, right? You're going to gamble to make the investment in this certification to make sure that I'm going to get future revenue streams, and hope that I do that. Now, thank God, most of the time, we have our winning record is better than our losing record, but it's that kind of situation, and that's where the Department of Defense needs to come in and say, listen, if you go through your certification and you get everything that you need, we'll start awarding 5-year contracts and 6-year contracts, and then we'll start taking a look at you as a preferred vendor and give you additional work because you've made the investment to do that. And we continually push back on the federal government with supply people, and not even the federal government, even with our primes here in the state of Connecticut, to say, you need to have a steady demand signal going out to the manufacturing sector in order for them to make these investments. And if the demand signal is not there and you're going like this, they're not going to make the investment to do this. And so we're going to have this chicken and egg thing, right? I'll make the investment if I know if I have the work. Yeah, but we're not going to give you the work until you make the investment. Well, and at some point in time we have to come to the middle ground that says, hey, we're going to make this investment, and we're going to when we see you're making the investment, we're going to lock you into some long-term contracts that are going to be able to give you comfort that you're going to be able to pay for that investment. And that's difficult to do. I mean, it's difficult to do because defense priorities change and other manufacturing defense, we're talking about CMMC, defense priorities change. I mean, we're seeing now increased investments in defense, which is always good for Connecticut. And as long as that continues, which I think it will, I think the shipbuilding right now we have contracts for shipbuilding that go into the 2040s. So, I mean, if you're in the shipbuilding supply chain, you should be making these investments because the work is there. And then the same thing in aerospace, especially military aerospace and commercial. I mean, commercial aerospace is. And we had Airbus come into Connecticut because they're behind on delivering planes, and they wanted to tap into Connecticut's aerospace chops. Right? They don't have an office in Connecticut. They came up from Virginia. They came up from all around the country to tap into Connecticut's aerospace capabilities. So there's this great opportunity, I think, for companies all across the spectrum to make an investment to do that. And again, putting Catalyst Capital in the marketplace softens it. It de-risks the investment a little bit more, for manufacturers as well. And that's where I think the trifecta of industry, big companies, small companies, and government coming together can help accelerate the adoption of these technologies.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's some interesting conversations that can be had to be able to enable the partnership, throughout the industry, because, there's the state government, there's federal government, you have the manufacturers, and then there's people like us on the technology side that we are a critical piece of the infrastructure for those manufacturers, which then in turn for the federal government to produce the things that they need. And there needs to be a conversation of some type of joint partnership that allows that to happen, because at the end of the day, whether there's subsidies that go to the manufacturers to be able to implement those things, or they defined us as technology providers and compliance assessors to be subsidize a way that we can provide the same service that we do on a normal basis to the manufacturers, that's another opportunity that we could be doing, where I don't have to increase my prices to the manufacturers or my services because it's more expensive for me to be able to provide those services, right? There's definitely a way to navigate this, but I think it's going to come down to those conversations that you've been talking about.
Yeah, and our position is that we'll give money to the manufacturers because we can't pick and choose winners and losers in that let them pick and choose who they want to use for their compliance and things like that. Mm-hmm. But if I was sitting in your seat, I would become fully versed on every state program that there is. Mm-hmm. And when I'm talking to a manufacturing company, I would sell those programs as a way to discount my services. So, for example, every manufacturer under 100 employees has access to $100,000 in grant funding. And it can be used for all kinds of things. And it can be used for CMMC as well. And my first question would be, have you tapped into the manufacturing voucher program? No, I haven't. Well, here's my quote to service this for you, but you can get a $100,000 matching grant, up to $100,000 in matching grant funding to do this. Let me show you how to do that and then guide them through the process of doing that. And I tell equipment manufacturers that, I tell bankers that, I tell everybody that you have a distinct advantage when you're a service provider in the state of Connecticut, in that you should understand what all the funding programs are from the state and make that part of your sales pitch to Connecticut companies. Yep. If you're selling in Massachusetts, you can't do that. You're selling in New Jersey or New York, you can't do that. Selling in Rhode Island, you can't do that. But in Connecticut, you can. And that way, the state of Connecticut is serving our manufacturers, and they're deciding we don't care who they pick for the services, because you have competitors, right? And I can't fund all the competitors. I can't do all that, but they get to pick who they want. But if I was sitting in your seat, I'd use as a competitive advantage all of those programs. I'd be sitting down with every manufacturer saying, hey, what is it you want to do? Because I can get you a discount.
Yep. No, for sure. And I love the mentality, because it is, again, that's exactly what I spend my time doing, is making sure that we have those conversations, because, there's a ton of, as much as we want to say we want more, right, from the state and from the federal government, but at the end of the day, there's a ton there and a ton there that doesn't get used, right? And so I've had the opportunity to be able to leverage that across nonprofits, from anything on the workforce development side, and specifically the internship programs and training dollars and that kind of stuff. And manufacturing has their own for that as well. And then obviously these grant programs that you're talking about, like run through CCAT and all of that, those dollars often don't get spent, right? Because people just don't understand how to navigate it, how to get in touch with it, or they're worried head down running the business day to day that they haven't been able to pull up high enough to say, hey, there's got to be a way to be able to help me get through this. And so being the advocate, for the organizations in Connecticut to make sure that they're taking advantage of the opportunities they have, I think is one of the things that will separate you from a lot of other providers.
Yeah, and I won't disagree with you that there are pools of money out there that are unspent, but I can assure you that the Manufacturing Innovation Fund money is invested, because we continually have to recapitalize the programs, and it takes us a long time to do that. And so we have gaps in funding, and we're starting to get to the point now where utilization rates are getting so high that we may be in, we've always been in this there's always money available mode. We may be shifting to hey, listen, this year we allocated $6 million to the program, and when the $6 million's up, you got to wait till the next budget year, where we've never done that. We've said, hey, $6 million, well, okay, looks like we're going over that. Let's get a couple more million. But at some point in time, I'm going to run out of money. And, I have a finite budget. And so, I can assure you, Sal, the Manufacturing Innovation Fund, there's no money ever left on the table there. So.
Yeah, no, I love that. And
we're investing it, but it my philosophy is it does no good. It does no good sitting in an account anywhere. It needs to be put in the marketplace. It needs to be put out there. I mean, it's the only way that, and we know what the impact is. So we make it easy for manufacturers to get access to this funding. I had a manufacturer come up to me and say, I did a robotics and automation project, and I got a manufacturing voucher program grant. And Paul, the easiest part of the project was getting money from the state of Connecticut.
Love it.
Who says that? Right?
Love that.
But that's what we're here. We want to put that money in the marketplace. We want to put it to work. It's your tax dollars going back to work for you to grow your business. It makes sense to us to make it easy for you to get your money back.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So if you were if you were a manufacturer, what would you say as advice to them as the first steps to, get into adopting these, newer technologies in the workplace, and specifically allowing them to stay competitive as the landscape continues to just get more and more competitive?
You can, your point of entry can be a couple of different places. So we have really 3 organizations that are focused around adoption of technology: CONSTEP, CCAT, which is Connecticut Center for Advanced Technology, and the Office of Manufacturing. If you come to the Office of Manufacturing, we're going to refer you into CCAT. If you go to CONSTEP, they're going to send somebody out to understand what your challenges are, and they may have some things at their disposal, and they'll refer you into CCAT. So really the common denominator around technology is CCAT, and from an education standpoint, even CONSTEP. So I think if you reached out to the Office of Manufacturing, we'd concierge you, we'd understand what your challenges are, and then we would bring you into the right sources. But your first step is to educate. Right. The second step then is to take a look at how you can be enabled to do this. And if you really want to get educated on the technology, you should go to the Connecticut Center for Advanced Technology, reach out to Eileen Candles at CCAT. She's the Director of Partnership. You reach out to Eileen. She'll set up a meeting with you. They have tours that they run on a regular basis. Go up there and start to learn about their capabilities and learn about the capacity. It's all available to all manufacturers in the state of Connecticut at no additional cost. You're already paying for it with your tax dollars. Get up there and use it. And then once you start to understand that, we'll help you navigate that journey and help you navigate how you can best do that. I mean, that's the reason why CCAT administers our grant programs. Right? They go up there and they talk about all these technologies, and then they say, well, we administer the grant programs to be able to do it. So we're making it a one-stop shop. And then if there's other things like you want to lean out your shop floor, you want quality training, you want a culture training, you want sales training, you want business development training. We have a program called Connects Marketplaces, which large manufacturers are using to build out their supply chains. You want to do business with large manufacturers, you need to be in there. That's all done by CONSTEP. Right? So I have these 2 amazing organizations that are working to serve manufacturers in 2 different lanes. All we need to know is, where's your challenge, right? And same thing with workforce. Right? So workforce, we've got Office of Workforce Strategy. We have workforce people at Advanced CT. We have workforce boards. We have regional sector partnerships. If you got a workforce issue, tell me. I'll tap you into that system. You want to build a sustainable company? You want to build your top line revenue or cut your costs? CONSTEP. We've got energy programs. We've got all these different kinds of programs. And if you want to drive innovation, it's CCAT. Go there, and there's programs there to be able to do that. But if you don't know where to go, come to the Office of Manufacturing, and we'll concierge you right to where it is that you need to go. We'll understand. We're really, really good at asking you questions. We run 45 different programs outside in the Office of Manufacturing. If I sent you 45 programs, your eyes would roll back in your head, and you'd go, I can't do anything. But if you come to me and I ask you some questions, I can give you 2 to 3 programs that'll have meaningful impact. But I'll also tell you that I have 42 other programs behind that. So if this doesn't work, don't despair. Just come back to us again. And that's the value and beauty of having an Office of Manufacturing. And that's why we exist, is to help manufacturers grow.
Yeah, it sounds like if I was a manufacturer today, the one thing that I should do as a leader in that space is reach out to the peer network, to the Office of Manufacturing, to the people that may have other ideas that I can now step outside of my day-to-day business and utilize the resources that might be out there. Because most people are like, I'm too busy, I have too much going on, like it's going to be too much work, and I need to focus on production, because at the end of the day, that's what matters. I need to make sure that I'm producing on a day-to-day basis. But based on that conversation, I think about you in your role at Carey Manufacturing beforehand, and you're like, if I could step into that with this 3 years wealth of knowledge that I have created, like, think about what different, type of organization it could have been at that time, with the information you have now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, you're right. I mean, it's that day-to-day challenge of, I've got to get production out, but at some point in time, you have to pick your head up, because if you don't, things are going to pass you by. I mean, we're really at this point where it really is, you got to innovate to be relevant. You really have to now, and you have to do that in order to maintain a sustainable business on a going forward basis. So at some point in time, somebody in that organization needs to start paying attention to it. And we have a lot of businesses that are run by baby boomers that are coming at the edge of the baby boomer thing, where they're not necessarily predisposed to that. It doesn't have to be you. Pick somebody in your organization that's really good with technology and say, hey, there's all this technology stuff. Go learn about it and tell us what we should be doing. And, that's what we did at Carey Manufacturing. Jack Carey, he didn't have an email address. He didn't have an email address. And emails went to his wife, and his wife told him who was emailing him. It was great. Can you imagine not having email? Can you imagine that? Right? What would your life be like? But Jack didn't have that. But he had an organization behind him that handled all of that stuff for him. And so we weren't ever send Jack Carey. We were going to send Mike Fitzpatrick, the 35-year-old engineer, 36-year-old engineer, who brilliant. And Mike, you go learn all that stuff. I can understand it, but I'm not going to understand it at the level that you understand it. So, so again, I think the message to manufacturers doesn't have to be you. Find someone in your organization that's passionate about it and let them do it. But you have to do it. You have to go on this journey. You have to really look at, how do I develop my workforce? How do I reduce the cost of doing business? And how do I drive innovation to help support my business over the long term? Because those are the companies that are going to win. And those are the companies that are going to take the business from those other companies. Listen, the state of Connecticut's here to support 100% of the manufacturers. Anybody who wants to go on that journey, come along for that journey. We just can't make you do it, right? So, we can't make you change. But when you want to change, we're here to take you along that journey and to guide you at the pace that you want to go at. So,
I love it. Paul, this was an awesome conversation today. I really appreciate the time and the perspective. I know you got quite the busy calendar running around, and appreciate you taking the time to connect
Sal,
with
this
me
was
today.
time well invested. So thanks. Cheers to vitamin C and vitamin B.
That's right. Appreciate it. So as far as the last part of all of our shows, we've been doing this fun thing now where we do a typing test.
Okay.
And so we really put your skills to the test to see where you rank. And there's been some really good scores. Yeah. There's been some really terrible scores. Okay. And so I'm curious to see where you think you're going to land. Good luck. There's no pressure besides all the pressure.
Okay.
We'll see. Back-to-back 1975 and 1976 typing champion.
All right, come on. Gotta get to the next line. Here we go. Analyzing results. 27 words a minute, 49% accuracy, 13 net speed. That's not good. That's poor score.
Paul.
That's slow, poor score. That's the worst score ever. Is that the ones you've done?
The worst one.
It is not the worst.
That's
ever.
a bad score. Gee, after I gave you all that build-up.
Listen.
I had cap locks on for the first word, too, so that screwed me up.